And the king of the peacocks was taken aback by this bold speech and had half a mind to send them all away together, but the prime minister declared that it would never do to have such a trick as that pass unpunished. Everybody would laugh at him. So the accusation was drawn up against them that they were impostors and that they had promised the king a beautiful princess in marriage who, when she arrived, proved to be as ugly as a peasant girl. This accusation was read to the prisoners, who cried that they had spoken in truth and that their sister was indeed a princess more beautiful than the day, and that there was some mystery about all this that they could not fathom. Therefore they demanded 7 days in which to prove their innocence. The king of the peacocks was so angry that he would hardly even grant them this favor, but at last he was persuaded to do so. While all this was going on at court, let us see what had been happening to the real princess. When the day broke and she and Frisk were equally astonished to find themselves alone upon the sea with no boat and no one to help them, the princess cried and cried until even the fishes felt sorry for her. "Alas," she said, "the king of the peacocks must have ordered me thrown into the sea because he has changed his mind and did not want to marry me. But how strange of him, when I should have loved him so much and we should have been so happy together." And then she cried harder than ever, for she could not help but still love him. So for 2 days they floated up and down the sea, wet and shivering with the cold, and so hungry that when the princess saw some oysters, she caught them, and she and Frisk both ate some, even though they didn't like them at all. When night came, the princess was so frightened that she said to Frisk, "Oh, do please keep on barking, for fear that the souls should come and eat us up." So now it happened that they had floated close to the shore, where a poor old man lived all alone in a little cottage. When he heard Frisk's barking, he thought to himself, "There must have been a shipwreck, for no dogs ever passed this way by any chance." And he went out to see if he could be of any use. When he saw the princess and Frisk floating up and down, and Rosette stretching her arms out to him, and cried, "Oh, good old man, do save me, or I shall die of cold and hunger." When he heard her cry out so piteously that he was very sorry for her, and ran back into his house to fetch a long boat hook. When he waded into the water up to his chin, and after being nearly drowned once or twice, he at last succeeded in getting hold of the princess's bed and dragging it to the shore. Rosette and Frisk were joyful enough to find themselves once more on dry land, and the princess thanked the old man heartily. Then, wrapping herself up in her blankets, she daintily picked her way up to the cottage on her bare little feet. There the old man lighted a fire of straw, and then drew out from an old box his wife's dress and shoes, which the princess put on, and thus roughly clad looked charming as possible, and Frisk danced his very best to amuse her. The old man saw that Rosette must be some great lady, for her bed coverings were all of satin and gold. He begged that she would tell him all her history, as she must safely trust him. The princess told him everything, weeping bitterly at the thought that it was by the king's orders that she had been thrown overboard. "And now, my daughter, what is to be done?" said the old man. "You are a great princess, accustomed to fare daintily, and I have nothing to offer you but black bread and radishes, which will not suit you at all. Shall I go to the king and tell him that you are here? If he sees you, he will certainly wish to marry you." "Oh, no," cried Rosette, "but he must be wicked, since he tried to drown me. Don't let us tell him, but if you have a basket to give me, I'd like it." The old man gave her a basket, and tying it round Frisk's neck, she said to him, "Go and find the best cooking pot in town, and bring the contents to me." Away went Frisk, and as there was no better dinner cooking in all the town than the king's, he adroitly took the cover off the pot, and brought all it contained to the princess, who said, "Now go back to the pantry, and bring the best of everything you find in there." So Frisk went back and filled his basket with white bread and fine red wine and every kind of sweetmeat until it was almost too heavy for him to carry. When the king of the peacocks wanted his dinner, there was nothing in the pot and nothing in the pantry. All the courtiers looked at one another in dismay, and the king was terribly cross. "Oh, well," he said, "if there's no dinner, I cannot dine, but I can take care that plenty of things are roasted for supper." When the evening came, the princess said to Frisk, "Go into town and find the best kitchen, and bring me all the nicest morsels that are being roasted upon the spit." Frisk did all that he was told, and as he knew of no better kitchen than the king's, he went in softly, and when the cook's back was turned, he took everything that was upon the spit. As it happened, it was all done to a turn, and looked so good that it made him hungry only to see it. He carried his basket to the princess, who at once sent him back to the pantry to bring all the tarts and sugar plums that had been prepared for the king's supper. The king, as he had no dinner, was very hungry and wanted his supper early. But when he asked for it, lo and behold, it was all gone, and he had to go to bed half-starved and in a terrible temper. The next day the same thing happened, and the next, so that for 3 days the king got nothing at all to eat, because just when dinner or supper was ready to be served, it mysteriously disappeared. At last the Prime Minister began to be afraid that the king would be starved to death, so he resolved to hide himself in some dark corner of the kitchen and never to take his eyes off the cooking pot. His surprise was great when he presently saw a little green dog with one ear slip softly into the kitchen, uncover the pot, transfer its contents into his basket, and run off. The Prime Minister followed hastily and tracked him all through the town to the cottage of the good old man. Then he ran back to the king and told him that he had found out where all his dinners and suppers went. The king, who was very much astonished, said that he should like to go and see for himself. So he set out, accompanied by the Prime Minister and a guard of archers, and arrived just in time to find the old man and the princess finishing his dinner. The king ordered that they should be seized and bound in ropes, and frisked also. And when they were brought back to the palace, someone told the king, who said, "Today is the last day of the respite granted to those impostors, and they shall have their heads cut off at the same time as these stealers of my dinner." Then the old man went down on his knees before the king and begged for time to tell him everything. While he spoke, the king, who for the first time looked attentively at the princess, because he was sorry to see how she cried, and when he heard the old man saying that her name was Rosette and that she had been treacherously thrown into the sea, he turned his head over heels 3 times without stopping, in spite of being quite weak from hunger, and ran to embrace her and untied the ropes which he had bound with his own hands, and declared that he loved her with all his heart. Messengers were sent to the princes to bring the princess out of the prison, and they came very sadly, believing that they were to be executed at once. The nurse and her daughter and the boatman were brought also. As soon as they came in, Rosette ran to embrace her brothers, while the traitors threw themselves down before her and begged for mercy. The king and the princess were so happy that they freely forgave them, and as for the old man, he was splendidly rewarded, and spent the rest of his days in the palace. The king of the peacocks made ample amends to the king and the prince for the way in which they had been treated, and did everything in his power to show how very sorry he was. The nurse restored to Rosette all her dresses and jewels and the bushel of gold pieces, and the wedding was held at once, and they all lived happily ever after, even Frisk, who enjoyed the greatest luxury, and never had anything worse than the wing of a partridge for dinner for all the rest of his life.